Hello, everybody, and welcome to this December pre-holiday edition of the Inside Track titled we're going with Click to Call, how dealers can unify the digital and voice experience. I'm very excited to be joined today by a special guest. We'll get here in just a minute, but it's a very cool topic today. So a little bit of housekeeping before we dive into that. As always, we love to keep these interactive, so you'll see that audience chat on the right-hand side of your screen, and you will be able to interact with us. You can type a comment in there. If you would much rather ask a question, you can go ahead and click that Q&A button on the right-hand side of the screen. You can type your question in that way. We will be answering them as we go through our content, my guest and I, and we will have a couple of polls today, so make sure you're watching the screen as those pop up. It's not going to be overriding my guest and I today. But today, like I said, the title is around, how dealers can unify that digital and voice experience. And we're going to really dive into some good conversation around how car shoppers are effortlessly moving between clicks and calls. But too often, dealerships don't, right? And we're going to talk and dive a lot into how campaign insights into phone performance outcomes can really help push move the needle at your dealership, identify where that online engagement breaks down when the phone rings, when you go from a digital shopper to an actual offline shopper, and how we can really start leveraging AI and automation and training to recover some of those lost opportunities or find new opportunities as we get in there. But enough about that. You've heard enough from me about getting into the topic. So let me bring my guest on, Mr. Jason from Digital Airstrike. How are you today, sir?
Eric, good to see you.
Good to see you as well. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yep.
So, Jason, why don't you give everybody a little bit of background on who you are and where you're coming from, and then we'll dive in.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So, Jason Barry, I'm the Chief Operating Officer for DAS Technology. Dealers that are in the audience, you may know us as Digital Airstrike. We work with over 9,000 dealers, retailers, partners, OEMs to provide communication tools, technologies, focusing on how do we support improve communications between dealers and consumers, and doing that through multiple platforms across our industry. So,
Love it.
Pleasure meeting here. I've got a great partnership with CallRevu.
We do.
It's we love the next 20 or so minutes talk about some of the best practices, some of the learnings that we have, and hopefully drop some knowledge. You go back to your stores and dabble in a couple of things to make some improvements. So
that is always the goal here on the Inside Track. So first one, let's dive in and get a little bit of your perspective around the industry and how it's changed a little bit over the last year. So how have you guys seen, and I have a lot of opinions on how it's evolved on the phone side, but how have you guys seen the customer journey evolve over the last few years post-COVID?
Yeah, absolutely. So on average, consumers hit up 18 different digital sources to try and figure out which category car do I want, which vehicle I want, then which dealership I want. And you think about tier 1, 2, and 3, and you think about the third-party marketplaces. There's a lot of stuff online. Like as an industry, it's like, be careful what you wish for. We digitized so much the last 5 to 10 years, which is a very good thing, creating greater transparency for consumers. It's just a lot for the consumers to digest.
Right.
And what's happening is it's a race for immediacy that a consumer hits those sites. They're filling out forms, right? It could be a 5-liner. It could be a credit app. It could just be a simple lead gen form. And highly effective dealers, what we've seen is they have the right processes and technologies in place to not just respond, it's just about an autoresponder, but it's to be able to effectively deliver back to that consumer what they are asking for.
Right.
Consumer asks for, is the car available? What's the payment? What are my color options? Are there any alternatives? And if you reply back to say, hey, thanks for your inquiry, right? We're closed right now, but we'd love for you to come into the showroom, and tomorrow we could do some test drives. There's nothing better than pissing off a consumer than having a response such as that. So
no, I think about even in my, we were talking a little bit before we got started here on the pre-call about how speed wins and how that it echoes in everything in life right now. And if you don't deliver, like you said, that immediate answer to, or even if a lot of what we see in our side of the world is, that sales rep blowing that phone call when they get on the thing and they're driving for the appointment. They're not understanding why they called or the why behind what they're looking for to get that. So how are you seeing some of the trends change in how dealers engage and convert those digital leads today and help serve that immediacy?
Yeah. So this term AI, right? It's pervasive. For those of you that are going to NADA, I guarantee you AI is going to be plastered on every single booth.
It has been.
The car wash is probably going to have AI on the side of it. Like, check out our AI. And there's hype, and then there's real practical use.
Right.
And I know the combination of us as well as CallRevu of using AI capabilities to add real value to the consumer experience, but also to provide the insight to a dealer. So let me kind of, Eric, answer your question, Eric. Let me provide that detail. So over the last 12 months, we've introduced through our technologies, we respond through our technologies with emails and text and messaging communications, whether a consumer has a lead they submit and there's a lead response, or they have a ongoing nurturing for sales, or they have a service inquiry. We're following up as well. And using generative AI, like, it's not a scary word, right? Very simply, what it means is using an algorithm or technology to generate content dynamically at a faster, more accurate rate than historical technologies. So if you're a dealer and you want to be able to send out a communication to the consumers in your database, or where they have a positive equity position, to create a video using generative AI, to say, hey, Eric, we see that your 2020 Jeep Grand Cherokee you've got positive equity in it, meaning that that equity position is more than what you owe in an outstanding loan. We'd love for you to come in and trade up. We'd love for you to be able to move quickly on that. And what we're seeing in that example, using that one example, we're using a significantly higher conversion rate of the consumer saying, huh, that's cool. That's for me. They're actually talking to me, and they're using my name, and that's a picture of my car.
Right.
And how'd they do that? Right. And historical technologies haven't allowed for that. And now with AI, it does.
Right.
And we're seeing a 2.5 times faster conversion rate of consumers buying the vehicle or servicing the vehicle compared to traditional communications, because you're creating relevant one-to-one communication.
Right. I think that's one of the biggest things that we push too, is, when you go from that digital space to the offline world that we focus on in our call analytics and our training, is understanding that immediacy that customer had, that marketing campaign that drove them to actually call your dealership, and understanding the context and the relevance between the two and not missing that. Right. And I think a lot of the dealerships that we work with, that we're seeing, is they're starting to understand the importance of bridging that gap and providing that context in real time to their agents, whether they're in the BDC, whether they're actually in the sales store. So that way, who's calling, what they just watched, and how to respond to that, and you're giving them all that information. So Jason, what are a couple of the bottlenecks that you guys are seeing in that kind of scenario that I just talked about, right? Where digital marketing success, and then it happens to leads to a call. Where are you seeing the hangups there?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge that we see is lack of alignment when a consumer asks a specific inquiry and the dealer all but ignores the inquiry. Right? There's an agenda, right? There's a script, the BDC or the sales team of like, this is our script. This is what we do. This is our recipe for success. And too often than not, there was a period of time I was selling vehicles online prior to my digital airstrike job.
Sure.
I started up a business in a technology. We were selling cars online, and even with that, there was still an interpersonal, a human, a communication aspect. And when a consumer asks specific questions and they're not answered, the consumer of the past would kind of maybe just roll over and go with it. Consumer of today, because there's so many options and paths for them to get the immediate information they're seeking for, they will drop said conversation and move to the next dealer.
Yep.
We're seeing that time and time again. We're seeing that from the feedback from our dealers. We're seeing that in the data on the engagement that we measure through those communications. It's the number one challenge a lot of dealers in the BDC have.
Yeah, it's super interesting that you bring that up, and that's good context into the first our first poll. Which, if you guys click on the chat tab on the right, you'll be able to see that poll up there. But when a digital lead calls your dealership, how clearly can you track what happens next? And we'll let that run as we go for the next couple of questions here, and then we'll take a look at the results for our audience there. But how do you guys measure the marketing ROI across all the different platforms that you work with, and where are you seeing that handoff typically break down and really cause issues?
Yeah, I think like a retailer on this, and obviously the end game is how many vehicles are you selling? What's the PVR? What's your service for the RO? What's your profitability per RO? Right? It's critical that any dealer, a manager has their arms wrapped around those KPIs.
Right.
And metrics, right? I also think like a marketer, and I think as a marketer, right, I'm responsible for getting that consumer in the boat and sailing. Using the bad metaphor, my point is it's the engagement, right? And I need to generate awareness, and I need to get that consumer aware to the point that they're engaging with my sales team or my BDC team or my service executive, my service manager. And at the end of the day, there's a lot of variables if a car is sold or serviced, right? Is the vehicle available? Is there financing? Is the part available for service? Is there an open bay that could get me in the day? All of those variables. So to answer your question around that, we measure engagement. We want to know as communications are going out, measuring the creative, the content, the video, the source of that lead. Are consumers engaging after they submit that initial inquiry? And we have data like, for example, at a dealership or group level, even a brand level, there are certain sources that perform very well for dealerships.
Right.
And there are sources that don't.
Right.
So you may have a boatload of leads that are submitted from a lead source that you're paying good money for, and you think, wow, I'm selling cars from there, right? So lead submission to sale is good. But that middle piece of measuring the engagement. So if I have very low engagement after that lead submitted, what's it saying? Well, maybe somebody's hitting a button really quick and then they disappear.
Yep.
And they're not really seeing the value, or the site of that lead source isn't effectively showing the value of that vehicle.
Right.
And using that data to then measure to determine, I got to drop that lead source and I need to spend more money on this lead source.
Correct.
Engagement is key. And as a business owner, yes, you want to see the P&L impact, but at the same time, understanding that engagement, that bridge, that path to the sale or the service, that's equally as important.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting to think about the reframing of, because I've been in digital marketing, demand generation almost my entire career, and now the reframing of, and when I got into this space 2 years ago, the auto industry was, roughly, I would say 4 or 5 years behind, their SaaS counterparts from a digital marketing perspective. And watching that growth over the last 2 years, they're now caught up. There's no, we work with dealers every day that are thinking about exactly what you said. It's not about how many calls I made. It's not about any about calls I had. It's not about how many ops. It's how long are we in, or how many times are we engaging, and how effective those engagements are along that customer journey at every touch point to draw them in. And I think our poll results are pretty interesting there. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. That's if you haven't voted yet, get it in there.
Hey, Eric, before you go there, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So I've been in auto for 20 something years, right?
Sure.
Between F&I to selling vehicles online to my leadership position here at DAS. And so you've attacked this from a non-automotive perspective. What are you seeing that businesses are doing really good that dealers are not doing? Like maybe some parallels there.
I think one of the things that the SaaS world caught on to really good is that engagement, right? They were very quick to understand, like, it's not about how much I fill that top of the funnel, but understanding that user engagement through the funnel, the entirety of the way, right? And not looking at things from an NQL to SQL to SAL to close one, but really opening up what that opportunity was, and then working backwards to figure out where those touch points were along and you said 18 touch points at the top. Forrester just came out with a framework where it's 18 with what they focus on as well, but understanding where each of those things and the attribution, not just Like, did it come in from a Google ad? Did it come in from this? But did the buyer group touch on what point did we touch the CFO, and at what point did we touch the CEO, and at what more, and in our world now, at what point did the GM get involved? At what point did our sales director get involved? At what point did our BDC director get involved? And really understanding how that is effective. And I think that even relates into when you think about a B2C journey, like a lot of our dealership partners and our customers and clients work with, Jason, is how many times did the husband of the house visit the website? When did his wife now get involved? Yeah. When did they decide that this dealership is the one that we're going to go and we're going to trust our relationship with, because this is the second biggest purchase we're going to make outside of our home or things like that? And, understanding where that is. And we're now getting to the point with technology like yours and technology like ours combining where we really get that. And I think it's kind of telling with the folks that have joined us today, right? 50% of you said that, you're not clearly, the data lives in different systems. And I think that's one thing that I'm seeing a lot of as well is dealers are doing a very good job of understanding Jason is one person and he can't exist as two different entities across two different systems. And we've got to start understanding that data layer and really getting that in there, which kind of leads us, into our next topic around turning campaigns into insights and, into phone performance outcomes. And, some of the biggest, I touched on a couple of the biggest challenges there around connecting marketing campaigns to phone outcomes, which, we do a very good job of it with understanding, where that phone source came from and driving that back to Google Analytics. But you guys really pick that up very nicely. So how are marketing teams using your technology to inform how to handle inbound calls and things like that? And I can touch a little bit on how we tackle it, but I'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely. So partnership, to give you a sense. So we support the communication, email, text, messaging, that allows a dealer to ingest information from the CRM and the DMS to then respond to leads, to nurture that customer over a period of time and build out these passive communications dynamically of like, what's the behavior of that consumer, right? What are they doing? Which type of vehicle are they interested in? When did they submit the lead? What the frequency of communication has been, and incorporate all of those details and the secret sauce and determining what's going to elicit the greatest level of engagement from that consumer. How do we get them to raise their hand, either A, to pick up the phone, or B, to send in a chat or a text or a message, or, right, heaven forbid, physically show up at the dealership, right?
Oh, that would be terrible, right?
Amazing, right? And then on the service side, using the dealer's data to then determine what's their current state of the last time that they serviced the vehicle. Did they decline services before? Understanding those codes from the DMS to then communicate from there. Their equity position, amongst a series of other communications. And we use the call activity embedded within those communications to track not only the clicks and the opens from those emails and texts, or the taps, if you like to say, but also the calling activity, right? What's driving that engagement? At the end of the day, it's a consistent theme of what's driving engagement for your dealership, that there are certain things that you think would work that they don't. And there are other things that you think would be a complete disaster,
and they work.
An amazing, great idea. And that's the beauty of marketing, is everyone's got an opinion, right? Everyone's got a thought. And you know what? I worked at this other dealer group and this worked amazing. And, I'm going to try it here and it's a flop. Like, and why? Right? It could be the time of day. It could be the time of year. It could be, so many variables that go into it. And the key is, as a dealer responsible for selling and servicing cars, you could only do so much. You could only go so deep in the data. And part of what we love about our systems is that we have those insights and analytics, and our account management team works side by side with dealers to provide those insights. What's working, what's not? Like, what are the top 3 things that failed last month? What are the top 3 things that worked last month? How do we do more of the stuff that's working? How do we take the budgets that you may be spending with third parties, not even through us?
Right.
So on platform A, may work really good as a third-party marketplace for one dealership, but it doesn't for another, and shifting those dollars away from things.
Sure.
So back to the phone calls It's just another metric that we
Mhm.
look at aligned with the other levels of engagement that you've got to think through and consider what's driving that engagement and how do you shift. And, at the end of the day, obviously it's for training and for adjustments moving forward, but we want to look laser focused at what's driving that consumer to make a decision.
Yeah, and it's interesting the way that you position that, right? Because it's when I talk to a lot of our dealers and our customers as we're, doing roundtables and learning industry insights, it really drives on they're starting to view there's almost to your point earlier that we spent so much time digitizing everything. They for they dealers are now starting to realize like, oh, wait a minute, damn it, we're still a face-to-face business. We
Yeah.
still have to pick up that phone and we still have to understand that. And I hate the term dark data. Our CIO says it all the time. I don't like it. I like to call it the middle, right?
Yeah.
We're the middle of that customer journey, right? We're the point where you're all of your engagement activity up until that point and all of the great marketing work and campaigns that your marketing teams are doing, it hit. And they've decided to pick up that phone. They've decided to make that phone call to your dealership out of everything else. And I think it's very interesting that looking at both your systems, we're able to look at that attribution up until the point where they picked up the phone. We're able to take that data now and understand the context of the call, but then also more powerfully deliver to the rep. And it's don't want to tip hats too much, but there's a very cool experience that we're working on for NADA when you stop by, and we'll talk a little bit about it more on part 2 of this next month. Where you're going to get to see some of this real context in action that we're working on the CallRevu side, which is going to be a lot of fun. But the next question is what's next really around, and then we'll switch topics and we'll kind of jump into a little bit because I know you and I definitely want to talk a lot about AI and how we're going to be able to leverage that more effectively. But what do you see next as like integration on advertising platforms and call and not necessarily us together, but just as the industry, how we're going to integrate as a whole to create a better customer journey?
So I always look at the sentiment of the consumer, but also what dealers are saying. And if you haven't seen it, if you're watching this live or even recorded, Cox Automotive just launched their Q4 dealer sentiment analysis, and talked about some macroeconomic trends associated with what's happening with vehicle affordability, talking about consumer price elasticity, in essence, like what's the consumer willing to pay, and what the dealer sentiment is and what they're thinking. And we're at a bit of a crossroads as an industry, right? There's some headwinds, right? We know what's happening with broader economic trends. We know that consumers are, they're willing to spend 50 grand on a new car on average, right? Are they willing to spend 43 on a used car on average? We're at a crossroads right now, and we have a lot of policies that are being discussed about extending loan terms and whatnot. And the key theme here, like we think about like what's happening in the next 3 to 6 to 12 months,
Sure.
vehicle affordability is going to be a major driver of the dealers that are successful or not. The dealers that have strong captive relationships, that have tremendous subprime and secondary lenders, whether it's credit unions or regional banks or national banks, and those that do an effective job promoting and talking through those options. At the end of the day, yes, vehicle availability is important and the color options are important, but now more than ever, that affordability is going to be front and center in messaging.
Sure.
And, are dealers effectively communicating their payments, not just price, but payments in a compliant way?
Exactly.
Are you putting the appropriate disclosures based upon regulations, both at the state and federal levels? Are you effectively delivering messaging consistently of what's going out that's on your website compared to what your outbound communications are? So if I was to kind of hang my hat on, read that report, right? If you haven't seen it, just Google it and check it out. The Cox Automotive Dealer Sentiment Analysis. A little plug for my friends over at Cox Automotive. But consider payment and affordability is going to continue to be a driver for us. The Fed conversations that rates will come down. Sure, if they come down, we always know there's a tail as to when that impacts auto loans and what happens with incentives. But that's going to be a major driver for all of us next year. It's of course, Jason, right? The key is, what are we all doing about it? Like as a dealer, as a provider in the industry, I know there's some vendors here that are online as well, of like, how are we servicing our mutual clients here and providing the right services and capabilities?
Yeah. And I think that's a big part of it is understanding where, like you said, the engagement is. And then when you get to the offline or the middle data is now you can actually have the context and the sentiment behind that actual call. And you can hear, I try and spend a couple of days every week just listening to some of the calls that come in, so I can understand the context of what's going on. And it's interesting to hear the emotion, that's driving behind it, because it is an emotional decision. So how can, one more question, then we'll transition into AI, part of the conversation for the last couple of minutes here. But, what are some of the black holes, that you see between form, fill, text, call, and how can technology help, avoid the event horizon of that black hole?
Yeah. So, basic blocking and tackling, do you have the right people in place to manage the process and to do it?
Yep.
Right. And making decisions of, do you have the right technologies in place? I don't care if you're, whether it's communications through a CRM or a lead response tool, or other form of mechanism. Do you have the right technologies in place to deliver the message that's aligned with your brand and your expectations? And are you auditing? And are you not just thinking of like, let me set it and forget it, but are you auditing what those communications look like?
Sure.
Again, a lot of these things are basic blocking and tackling. They're one-on-ones of running an effective business. But we know every month a number hits the reset button, and we have to execute consistently. All of us looking ourselves in the eye, are we adhering to those kind of three principles of people, process, and technology to say what I'm doing is really making a difference? Or if I was the consumer, would that response, would that fly?
Yeah.
Or would I drop and move on to the next guy?
Right.
So that's the basic disciplines of what we think about and how we work with our dealer partners. Are, it's so important as we think through, how do we differentiate? We're a tech company, but at the end of the day, we're a people company. We're a relationship company. I know you guys are as well. Of, you could spit out reports left and right, but if you're not doing anything about it, then
yeah, exactly. If you're not using, and I think that's one of the biggest things that, our account management team and we preach here is you can have all the metrics in the world, but if you're not going to use the data for what it's telling you, or even really understand where it is, that's where it is. And that's kind of the next poll question is live. If you guys want to go ahead and participate, where you see the biggest drop off between online engagement and appointments. And we'll leave that up as we dive into, leveraging AI automation and training to really recover, opportunities or find the opportunities as well. So, the first thing, and we talked about it a little bit more, and you had a cool party trick, and I don't know if you want to share it on the live on the show here.
Oh,
but, right, how can these AI assistants, and when I say AI assistants or these agentic experiences, right, like what you guys have with your automation, what we have with our training solution and our DVA, work together to help start creating that around the clock coverage for dealerships?
Yeah, sure. It's I'd say up until about 6 months ago, anyone would say, "What's the only place that you have to focus on?" If you had to pick one place as a dealer, what's the top of the funnel? And everyone would unanimously say, if we're having a poll, Google, right? And we're seeing a tremendous shift in the last 6 months. So Deloitte, big consulting firm, did an analysis, and this is broader, not just automotive, but 51%, according to Deloitte, 51% of consumers, they're looking to buy something, whether it's a car or other kind of packaged goods or whatnot, are starting in some form of AI platform.
Correct.
Whether it's Perplexity or ChatGPT or Grok or Llama, or pick your fancy new company. And ironically, majority of those consumers are actually going back to Google, right? Because they want to validate it, because that's what their comfort is. That's their security blanket. By the way, Google Gemini is a part of the Google entity. And part of what we're seeing, a lot of these platforms, virtually all of the AI platforms, when consumers are asking questions, the number one source of what is being presented as the option is driven predominantly based upon reputation of that business. So the old school ways, what's the reputation of your dealership? What are your Google reviews look like? And are you responding? What's your social content? What's the information that you've got on DealerRater or Yelp or many of the platforms? Those details, that content, how you respond, are the primary driver of these AI platforms, to ensure that, again, it's not 10 links on a front page now.
Right.
It's one, right? So we talked about a little party trick before. Let me pull this up here. I've got Chat GPT. Probably you can't see it with my background. I'm actually going to take my background off. Let's see if that works. There we go. You guys can see what my office looks like. Chat GPT. I'm going to pick a dealer, right? And I'll be honest with you, I let's see what the results are. So this is play a scenario. Hey, I have a question for you. I'm in Seymour, Indiana, and I need to buy a Silverado.
Absolutely, Jason. So you're in Seymour, Indiana, and you're looking to get yourself a Silverado.
You got it. And what I want to do is I need to know the best dealership that you recommend that I should be talking to buy that car.
Absolutely. Let's narrow that down for you. So in and around Seymour, Indiana, a couple of dealerships typically stand out. We can definitely look at places that have a really solid reputation for customer service and a good inventory of Silverados. I'll do a quick check on some of the top rated spots around there, and I'll let you know which one might be the best bet.
All right, great. So it's going to start thinking about that. But the number one reputation, right? Yep. So it's going through, it's searching the web, right, as we go through. And it's
so from what I found, Jason, Bob Pointer Chevrolet Buick GMC is actually a pretty solid dealership right around your area in Seymour. They should have the 2024 Silverado.
So do me a favor. What about where did you find their reputation? Like, which sources did you pick that picked this dealership out of, a whole bunch of dealers in the area?
Yeah, definitely. So basically, I pulled info from a few places that tend to rate dealerships. For example, sites like DealerRater or even Google Reviews. They aggregate a lot of customer feedback, and they consistently show that Bob Pointer is pretty well regarded in that area. So that's the kind of source I'm pulling from. Basically, well-known review.
I'm just going to pause there for a second. So you're getting a point as a consumer. All of a sudden, as me plugging in Silverado, Seymour, Indiana options, boom, you're just pummeled with all sorts of stimulation and detail. This is a great dealership, right? We work with them, right? At the end of the day, they do a tremendous job of having a lot of positive reviews, generating those reviews, replying to reviews. And quite honestly, every business has this. They have negative reviews too.
Yep.
But they also do a great job of responding to those, addressing them, and resolving them.
Yep.
And you're seeing in this new world era of AI, these platforms, there's no SEM. There's no search engine management. There's no purchasing of get me to the top of the list here. There's no Google Performance Max to get my vehicles on the top of that page. Right. You have to mind your own fences. You need to make sure you got to make sure your farm is tended to. Mm-hmm. And if you're not doing the basic blocking and tackling for years that have happening digitally, we've been doing it for 16 years. The risk now is greater than it's ever been.
Right.
And that all feeds into the top of the funnel of, they're going to pick up the phone and call. What's their experience going to be? They see that if you're not the one that's top of the list, what's the probability they're actually going to call? Yeah. So AI is changing the game as a consumer. I'd encourage everybody, you don't have to pay for it. Download ChatGPT or Gemini or Perplexity and just play with it. Search in your local market. See where you come up. See how easy it is to get a phone number, which phone number actually comes up.
Yep.
And how do you navigate through that?
Right. I think, a big part of it, and I don't know if the audience hears this, but, making sure it's the generative GEO, right? The generative engine optimization. I think that's a big part of a lot of dealers. And, if you think about NADA 2 years ago, when it was in Vegas, not the snowpocalypse that was last year. Yeah. But even last year, talking about the amount of AI on the floor and how it's going to not, I don't want to say it's going to, it's going to enhance your team as it continues. And if you think about it, and that's the way we think about it here at CallRevu, is it's not a replacement. It's not going to do your job for you. It's going to give you the context in the moment that you might have missed initially. Or it's going to help you in a real-time like coaching environment be able to say, oh, well, the customer just said this, we should maybe try 1, 2, and 3. So it's going to even that playing field out and really kind of go there. And my internet's dipping real quick, guys. If you notice my head bobbling a little bit, I'm getting a warning here on my screen. Not sure why, but it is raining in Texas. So that means that the world has lost its mind and it's below 70 degrees. So everything are there. So Michael wanted to know how many Chevy dealers are in Seymour. Is that a new conversation or a continuation? General purpose elements or engine needed to prioritize?
Great question. Yeah, great question. I know for a fact that they're not the only Chevy dealer in that area. I think within a 25 kind of radius, there's about five or so dealerships in that area. Lots of competition as well. And what was the other part of the question? Continuation of. No, that was a brand new. That was not like me building on like me like starting it a couple of hours ago or before this webinar. That was just a straight up brand new question that I asked ChatGPT.
Love it. So a couple of questions here. I know we're a little bit, we're getting close to time anyway. So audience members, if you do have any questions, and I do want to share the results of our second poll there. So the poll was where you see the biggest drop off between online and engagements, and overwhelmingly 66% of the our audience said inconsistent follow-up across the teams, which makes sense from what we're hearing about, right? Is we still have that, and I know you and I have talked about it, and I talked a little bit about it with Kristen on your side, as well as the data silos that exist within dealerships and how one team handles how one team handles a conversation versus another team. And there's still some inconsistencies there. So that makes sense.
Yeah.
So what do you see, as the metrics that and I have my from the CallRevu standpoint, but what are the leadership teams should watch out to, really measure the impact and ROI of programs and the effectiveness of them?
Yeah, great point. So I want to address the kind of recovering missed opportunities. There's a metric that we use called re-engagement.
Sure.
The old stick the re in front of engagement. And in essence, it's the lost soul that you thought just disappeared on you. May have bought a car, maybe never did, just hasn't engaged with your team after the initial flurry of emails and texts and calls, and maybe showed up and then poof, they disappear. Like, what do? You write them off and you move to the next ones that are coming in. And this re-engagement metric is so critical because it's like, for me, it's almost like a lost souls analytics report of like, my goodness, like I sold 150 cars last month, but of those 10 came from consumers that I wrote off. That because we've got the communications, the nurturing in place, I'm able to identify and recapture, re-engage that consumer that disappeared, but they are back.
Yep.
Because I actually had the discipline and the communication and the process dynamically through the system to then communicate. And many consumers are like, yeah, you know what? I lost my job, right? And I was just too embarrassed. I didn't want to call. I'm making up an example. Or we had a life-changing event. Or, yeah, I don't know. I forgot. I started buying and then I just like dropped out and now I'm back in. The multitude of reasons. The key is the discipline as a dealer that you have those communications in place to capture that base.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's the interesting thing on our side. And we think about the ecosystem of what we do and allowing to have those communications in place, but then also offer a very low impact or non-customer impacting way to train, like we do with our generative AI training system, where you can have those conversations and like you may have 4 or 5 bad conversations in a row, or you're noticing a trend where you can build that challenge and then have your team ready to go with actually getting those reps in the batting cage, which is kind of cool.
Bingo.
So in the last couple of minutes here, I'm going to push, our last poll out to the audience. Let me get that going. And then this is kind of, if you remember Inside the Actor Studio with James Lipton, I kind of like to ask a couple of future looking questions on that. So coming out of this webinar and this conversation with you, which has been great and very illuminating, Jason, is what's one step dealers can take this week to better align their digital marketing with their phone performance?
Yeah. It sounds so basic. It's call the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
See what the experience is.
Yep.
Like, A, do the numbers work? I know it sounds like basic, but B, like, how is the phone being answered? Like, do it yourself as a business owner, as a decision maker. And a lot of folks, familiar names that I'm seeing here, of like, hold yourself accountable to that, and don't expect that your staff is going to do it. I remember I'm going to rewind. I started my automotive career. It was a small company at the time, and it grew to a very large company. And our CEO, he did it. I remember, and I learned, and I was in my early 20s, and he walked up to me. He was like, "How is this good?" Right? And he reported it, and I was beyond embarrassed, right? And he took the time to do that. I think all of us, if there's one thing, inspect what you expect. It sounds hokey. It's probably what my 5th grade teacher told me, but so important.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I agree with that. Is you have to eat your own dog food, and you have to understand where the gaps are. And the only way you're going to do that is to pick up the phone or go through the processes that you're expecting your customer to do. We make so many assumptions that, from a user experience flow or a customer journey flow, it's like, oh, we know that this is going to happen, but then we go and do it in practice and it just doesn't work. So
Exactly.
what does, in your opinion, success look like for a truly unified customer experience?
Yeah, I think it's the consumer touches 36 different steps when buying a car. Google did a really good survey. If anyone want to see the kind of results of it, we've got a nice visual of it. Feel free to hit me up, Jason B at dashtechnology.com. I think it's on our website as well. So for the consumers go into battle when they want to buy a car.
Mm-hmm.
We know what the experience is. All the research points to it, and the key is, how do we reduce that friction? We also know it's the second most expensive asset that they're ever going to buy. So how do we be empathetic as an industry? How do we, provide an experience that's transparent? And how do we respond, whether it's a phone call or a text or an email? How do we provide them the information that they're seeking?
Right.
So maybe not exactly the answer you're looking for, but that empathy is a key word as a consumer navigates through that process.
No, I agree completely. And last question here is, what excites you the most about where this collaboration is headed between marketing aspects and, kind of the middle that I talked about in this world?
Definitely. So a lot of the folks that are online, you're either a client of Dash Technology or a client of CallRevu, or maybe you're just inquisitive between the two. And our DNAs are very similar, right? We think about the customer first, the consumer first. We're very pro dealer centric, right? We live and die with the dealer, right? And we are in that seat. We have our team of account managers, both sides of the partnerships, people that spun paper, that work retail, that understand the heartache that it takes to sell a car, service a car, and the joy of that. And we're all in an automotive. We get the value. We understand the ROI of what's needed to be successful, and we live that every day. And our technologies, both companies, we challenge ourselves to continue to innovate. When I started talking with the CEO from CallRevu, it's almost like we were just talking, as if we were the same in the same boardroom. Our commitment to the clients and the dealers. So, that's the piece that I'm really excited about. You want to be in the boat with somebody that you trust and you have the same focus, and that's what we do.
I love it. Yeah. And that's, I echo that sentiment, right? I think it's a passion for serving the customer, and it's a passion for innovation, which, I know we both of us have very much so. And we hope that came out a little bit in this conversation. Well, that we are at time, ladies and gentlemen, for the November edition. Make sure to pay attention to your emails. We are going to have part 2 of this sometime right before NADA at the end of January. So we'll start getting conversations with that. Jason, thank you so much for joining me. This was a great conversation. I appreciate the insights and the candor. And thank you for our audience for joining us. Make sure to check your emails. We'll have the follow-up communication out with the on-demand links for this tomorrow. And we will have this posted up on Spotify, Apple, and wherever you want to listen to if you're into the podcasting version of it as well early next week. So again, Jason, thank you so much. Again, I'm Eric Glass with CallRevu, and we will see you guys next month. Take care, everybody.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Bye.